G'day viewers, I'm Adam Stokes. Welcome back to the channel. As we prepare for the Australian election upcoming, we can see that there's a lot of mainstream media around the two main parties, but what I'm trying to achieve here is give you an insight into other candidates that are running beyond the mainstream's representation of the choices that we have available. I recently interviewed Senator Rennick and that video did very well, and there's many new subs here who want to hear the other side. There has been an absolutely overwhelming appeal to have Dr. Andy Schmulow on the channel, and he joins us today. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Adam, and a very warm hello to your subscribers.
Andy, I'll get straight into it. Who's in charge in Australia?
Well, I'll tell you who's not in charge. We the people. We are not in charge. The people in charge of Australia, it depends on the issue. If it comes to the cost of living crisis and the price of groceries, then Coles and Woolworths are in charge. If it comes to the profitability of the big four banks and their ability to continue committing criminal acts and engaging in criminal conduct 6 years after the Hayne Royal Commission, 6 years after the Banking Royal Commission, then the banks are in charge. If it comes to running the public service, then PwC, KPMG, Ernst & Young, and Deloitte are in charge. And what this boils down to, and it's part of the reason why I'm running, our political system no longer functions. It no longer functions because the two major parties, the Liberal Party and the Labour Party, or as I like to call them, the Liberal Party and the Diet Liberal Party, fewer calories, same great liberal taste, are bought by and sold to big corporate donors. Big corporations have donated about $260 million to the two major parties in the last 10 years. And they can't fight an election, and they can't fight one another without those party political donations. If they upset their party political donors, then the donors will stop donating to their party, but continue donating to the other party, then they'll lose the election, right? I'm standing for election for the Citizens Party. We're not a wealthy party, we're a small party. We never have and we never will take corporate donations, and we don't have millions of dollars to splash around. So I'm looking at what the other parties are doing. Clive Palmer's party, for example, putting up massive billboards. We don't have that kind of money. If you're in the Liberal Party or the Labour Party and you want to put up billboards, or you want to put up call flutes, or you want to provide incentives to your volunteers, or you want to do text message send outs, all of that stuff costs money. Where does the money come from? Coles and Woolworths, Commonwealth, NAB, Westpac and ANZ, plus, of course, even more from the Australian Banking Association and the Financial Services Council, PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, mining companies, pokey operators. So if you're in one of those 5 sacred categories, then you get a free pass on whatever you do, and neither of the major parties will touch you. Oh, and I forgot very importantly, Qantas, right? We have officially a duopoly in our airline industry. In effect, it's actually more a monopoly with one company, the Qantas Jetstar Group. That's why we pay $1,000 to fly from Melbourne or Sydney to Perth. But in America, you can fly from one side of the country to the other side of the country for $200. That's why we pay $1,000 more for flights to Europe, because our politicians are bought off by Coles and Woolworths, Qantas, the banks, the big consulting companies, the miners, and the pokey operators. And, you know, Adam, what makes it even worse, we hear that we're in a cost of living crisis. To use the word crisis gives the impression that it's a short-term thing, that it's a thing that's happening at the moment. It's not happening at the moment, mate. It's been going on for years, getting worse for years. And I'll tell you what, it's going to not get better, it's going to get even worse, because there are no fixes that are being put in place. And you know, the Productivity Commission said in a report that was released a month ago, our supermarkets are now the most profitable supermarkets in the world. And they also said that from COVID onwards, our supermarkets have been increasing the margins, their profitability margins. So when Coles and Woolworths turn around and say it's not our fault, it's the fault of the suppliers, that's a lie. It's not the fault of the suppliers. Coles and Woolworths are gouging Australian consumers. Now, I've said this many times, I've said this in many fora, and people have shot back at me and said, yeah, but you can go and shop at Aldi, or you can go to your local butcher, or you can go to small independents. Small independents don't have the capacity, and your local butcher doesn't have the capacity to match the amount of consumption that is needed, the amount of consumption, the consumption needs that need to be met. The only companies that have that capacity are Coles and Woolworths. And because they have that capacity, they set the prices that everybody else in the industry in one way or another will follow, right? And what makes it even worse, the Productivity Commission said that Coles and Woolworths are a duopoly. Actually, not really. The people who are significant shareholders in Coles and Woolworths are American investment funds, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and they are significant shareholders in Coles and Woolworths. So it's actually a monopoly with two different names. And why do they bother keeping two different names? To bamboozle the public, to hoodwink the public. Because if the public saw that there was only one supermarket, then there would probably be an irresistible pressure to break it up. So why isn't there an irresistible pressure to break up this duopoly? Bear in mind, in the time that I've lived in Australia, which is about 30 years, we've seen a whole range of supermarket chains disappear because they've been swallowed up by Coles and Woolworths, Bilo, Franklin's, Safeway, and all manner of supermarket chains that were state and territory specific. But even if we just still had Bilo, Franklin's, and Safeway, if instead of having two major supermarkets, we had five, what does Economics 101, what does baseline, bog standard economics teach you about the way to bring down prices? Foster competition. There ain't no competition. And why is there no competition? Because the government won't touch Coles or Woolworths. Now, there's a report in the newspaper today, in the Sydney Morning Herald. Let me see if I can just find it momentarily. I want to read this to you because it's just absolutely staggering.
Whilst you're bringing that up, I'll just touch on some comments. Sleeman Joanna says, well done, Andy. You are real and courageous. Steve J says, the power to lobby controls the narrative. Private C says, when abolish politicians and parties and replace them with a mobile app. Rose Schmidt says, Andy is the real deal. He acts on everything you hear him speak on. A man of action and not words. Whilst you're bringing that up, Andy, I've been listening to your work in the background and I've been very impressed with basically your courage to speak out. I've asked this to the Senator Rennick before, and I'm just wondering, as you're running for the seat in New South Wales as a senator, have you ever been threatened for your outspoken words?
Yeah, what day is it today?
So it's
all the time.
Who's threatening you? Big corporations, politicians, just random individuals threatening you?
PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which was up until recently the biggest audit and consulting and assurance firm in Australia, and which 18 months ago was exposed for their rampant facilitation of tax evasion. Now, I want to be clear here. Everybody has the right to minimize their tax within the bounds of the law. What you do not have the right to do is evade tax. That's illegal. And what we found was PwC had been monetizing tax evasion. They had been stealing government secrets that they were given, let me tell you how they were given these secrets, because it's a mind-blowing story. PwC created loopholes in the tax system so that multinationals could evade tax. Google, Microsoft, Apple, Twitter, or whatever Elon Musk is calling it this week, Facebook, all of these multinationals, News Corp, they come to Australia and they earn billions of dollars in revenue. How do they earn that money? They run businesses using facilities provided to them by the taxpayer for free. I'll give you some examples. Roads to get to their offices, an electricity grid to power their offices, an NBN network to sell their tat, schools to educate their kids, hospitals to treat their workers when they get sick, a police force to keep them safe in their beds at night, a judicial system so that they can litigate their rights. All of that stuff is provided to them by the taxpayer for free. They cannot run their business without that stuff, and in return for which they pay no tax. They do it through a whole series of sophisticated tax evasion schemes that have got nicknames like the Double Dutch Irish Sandwich. Or with companies like Google setting up their head office in places like a Caribbean island. Google doesn't operate on a Caribbean island. Google doesn't have their head office on a Caribbean island. I can't remember which island it is. Some little holiday island is where Google's official head office is. Why? It's not where their real head office is. Why? Because they pay no tax, right? So PwC has created this tax evasion framework. It's a tax evasion framework in which multinationals come to this country, they earn billions of dollars in revenue, they pay no tax. So the government, I think it was the Abbott Hockey or Turnbull Hockey government, was absolutely tearing their hair out about multinationals not paying tax. So PwC, listen to this, right? You've got to hand it to these guys. They are slippery eels covered in Vaseline. PwC went to Joe Hockey and they said, you know this problem you've got with multinationals not paying tax? We'll show you how to fix it. They neglected to say, you know this problem you've got with multinationals not paying tax, the problem we created. We'll show you how to fix it. But no free lunch, you got to pay us. First, you've got to set up all sorts of entities like the Board of Taxation. You, the federal government, you've got to pay to set that up, and you've got to pay to staff it, and you've got to pay a secretariat to manage it. And then you've got to pay us to sit on that Board of Taxation. We'll meet 10 or 12 times a year. And for those 10 or 12 meetings, you've got to pay us each $140,000. It's $140,000 over and above the $2 or $3 million we earn as partners at PwC, $2 or $3 million we earn in fees by showing Google how to evade tax, right? It's insult added to injury, right? So Hockey set up the Board of Taxation, put PwC on the board. They gave the Hockey Turnbull government advice on how to fill up and stop the loopholes. And they built in back doors. This is the venality of these people. This is the slimy, tricky, disgusting, treacherous venality of these people. They built in back doors into this new tax regime. They got the government to pay them to do this, and as soon as the government had accepted their advice, they scooted off to North America in a project called Project North America. This all came out in Senate testimony. And they went to big multinationals that were not yet their tax evasion clients, and they said to them, we will show you how to continue evading tax because we've set up the new framework to stop and block the loopholes, but we've built in secret loopholes around those loopholes. And they were caught. When they went before Parliament, they lied. They lied and they lied and they lied and they lied. They said this was a process error. They said we didn't mean to do this. They said, this is not who we are. They said, no one is more shocked than we are. I went before Parliament and I said to them, I said to the Senate committee and I said to the Parliamentary Joint Inquiry, I've done a little bit of research. Guess what I've found? I've found evidence that PwC's been doing this all over the world. They were pinged in a 2011 House of Commons report. They were pinged in a 2014 UK High Court case against Prudential Life. They were pinged in 2004 when the ATO took the Pratt Family Foundation to court. They were pinged last year in ATO versus PwC. Let me tell you about that. One of the ways in which PwC gets away with facilitating tax evasion and selling Australian tax secrets to the enemies of His Australian Majesty, the King. One of the ways in which PwC gets away with committing treason, let's call it for what it is, right? I don't shy away from putting the right name on the crime. Let's call it for what it is, treason. One of the ways in which these bastards get away with treason is that every time they give advice that is illegal, they cover it with legal professional privilege. Now, I'm a lawyer and I want to explain this to you. It is an inviolable, sacred principle of our law that if you or any one of your viewers goes and speaks to a lawyer to get legal advice, anything you discuss with your lawyer is covered by client-solicitor privilege. That client-solicitor privilege is even stronger than the privilege you get when you go and tell your doctor your most intimate medical details. Go and tell your doctor that you've had a termination. Go and tell your doctor that you've had, I don't know, a sexually transmitted disease. Go and tell your doctor that there's been an occasion when you use recreational drugs. All of that stuff is confidential unless a court says the doctor has to give the court that information. Then it's not confidential anymore. You can't even do that with solicitor-client privilege. If something is covered by solicitor-client privilege, it is locked in a vault forever. So what PwC did is they bought a law firm. This is an accounting firm, right? They bought a law firm. It's not a real law firm. It's a play, pretend law firm, but it's got lawyers in it. And what they would do is every time they gave a customer, a client, advice on how to break the law, they would make sure that there was a lawyer in the room. Could have been a graduate who finished his law degree 5 minutes ago. Could have been a law graduate, has no experience as a lawyer, sitting there with his headphones in, listening to the footy. Doesn't matter. As long as there's a lawyer in the room, PwC turned around and said, privilege, privilege, can't look at these documents, privilege. Or what they would do is they would send advice like they did for a multinational Brazilian meatpacking company, a notorious global tax evader called, I think it's called JBL, JBI, JBL. They gave written advice to JBL on how to evade tax. But instead of sending the memo straight to JBL, they would send the memo via an internal PO box at PwC. The internal PO box is the law firm. The law firm would then on-send it to the client. And because it's been routed through the law firm, as if by magic, legal privilege. You're only allowed to assert legal privilege under very specific circumstances. You are not allowed to assert legal privilege when an accountant is telling you how to break the law and evade tax. So the tax office said to PwC, they met with Luke Sayers. Luke Sayers, who became chairman of the Carlton Football Club, he's had to resign recently because of the whole dick pic scandal. Lukey Sayers. Jeremy Hirschhorn in Jeremy Hirschhorn is the Deputy Commissioner of the Australian Tax Office. Jeremy Hirschhorn gave testimony to Senate estimates. He said he went to see Luke Sayers 6 times. And he said to Mr. Sayers on 6 occasions, Mr. Sayers, we're very concerned. We are concerned that PwC is misusing legal professional privilege to hide providing advice which is breaking the law. Hirschhorn said to Senate estimates, we met with Mr. Sayers 6 times. We gave him that warning 6 times. Sayers was asked about it. He said, I have no recollection. We've heard that one before. I have no recollection. Right? Who sent the dick pics, Mr. Sayers? I have no recollection. So the tax office got absolutely fed up. And they took PwC to court in a case called ATO versus PwC to challenge the legal professional privilege that PwC was slapping on all their documents. The case went before Mr. Justice Mashinsky. The case involved 44,000 documents. 44,000 documents covered by privilege. A global multinational law firm providing extensive advice to a multinational client on a long and complex transaction wouldn't produce 44,000 documents covered by privilege. And this isn't even a law firm. There's an accounting firm. What are accountants doing producing 44,000 documents covered by privilege? So the tax office said to Justice Mashinsky, we don't think these privilege claims are genuine. We think they're bogus. So the judge said, well, I can't look at all 44,000 documents. We'll be here for the next 10 years. So we'll take a sample and we'll look at that sample and we'll do a regression analysis and we'll see what percentage of the sample, if any, maybe no percentage, maybe 0% of the sample has got legal professional privilege when it shouldn't. Maybe they haven't done anything wrong. We'll look at the sample. We'll see if there's a percentage where there's documents that have been covered by privilege that shouldn't. Now, let me say at this point, if the outcome of that analysis was that 1% of the documents had privilege when they shouldn't, or even 2%, or maybe 3%, then you could say, well, it's an error in how you interpret privilege. But if it was as high as 5%, right? If it was high as 5% of 44,000 documents, and I'm a lawyer, so my maths is absolutely shocking. Let me just, if it was 5%, then that would have been 2,000 documents. 2,000 documents covered by privilege, which shouldn't be covered by privilege. And why would you do that? Why would you cover 2,000 documents by privilege when they shouldn't be covered by privilege? Because you're trying to hide the commission of a crime. Guess what percentage it came out at? Not 1%, not 2%, not 3%, not 5%, 58%. 25,500 documents that PwC covered with legal professional privilege that didn't deserve legal professional privilege, and there's only one reason why you would do that. So that you don't get sent to jail because the court looks at the advice that you've given JBL and goes, you're giving people advice on how to break the law. So I went hammer and tongs at PwC. I went hammer and tongs at them in my Senate submissions. I went hammer and tongs at them in my parliamentary joint inquiry submissions. I absolutely kicked the living daylights out of them in my parliamentary joint inquiry testimony. I was being quoted in the press frequently, and I was destroying PwC's narrative. The narrative, which is, we've never done this before, this is an anomaly, this is an aberration, this is not how we operate, these are not our values. And I pointed out, not your values, you've done this all over the world, mate. You have done this This is your business model. This is not your first rodeo. This is how you operate. And in fact, the CEO of the Tax Practitioners Board, which is another government agency, it's the government agency which actually started the ball rolling. It's the government agency which first started to crack down on PwC evading tax. It's the government agency which found Peter John Collins guilty of tax evasion. The CEO of the Tax Practitioners Board, a fellow by the name of Michael O'Neill, gave evidence to Senate estimates in about March of last year, about a year ago. And he said the Tax Practitioners Board has evidence that PwC has been inserting itself into tax policy formulation throughout the OECD. OECD is the 60 biggest economies in the world. I can't remember how many countries there are in the OECD, but the OECD is basically, I can't remember exactly what the membership number is, but these are the biggest economies in the world, but lots of them, like not the G8, like much bigger than the G8. How many is it? You'll tell me in a moment, I'm sure. 60, 100, whatever it is.
It says over here, it says, well, we worked with over 100 countries across the world to build stronger, fairer and cleaner societies. This from OECD.org.
So there are the 100 biggest economies in the world. So it doesn't include Zimbabwe. And maybe it doesn't include Upper Volta, but it includes pretty much every other country in the world. Michael O'Neill said, Chairman, CEO of the Tax Practitioners Board, he said, we have evidence that PwC has been inserting itself throughout the OECD into tax policy formulation where they have, as he put it, where they have blended private and public advice so as to facilitate tax evasion. So in other words, the reason why the richest people in the world, the top 0.1%, are getting richer and have amassed trillions of dollars. The richest 0.1% have amassed trillions of dollars, which they have hidden in offshore tax havens. And hundreds of billions of dollars in art in secret repositories at the Geneva airport, where the art is never landed, it never goes through customs, so it's always and forever in the duty-free part of the airport, and it's kept in vaults, and they then borrow against those artworks and never pay tax. The reason why the richest 0.01% of the population keeps getting richer is not because they're smarter, it's not because they're harder working, it's because they pay no tax. The reason why the biggest corporations in the world are getting bigger and wealthier, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, Tesla, Elon Musk's group of companies, News Corp. The reason why these companies get bigger and their CEOs get ever bigger pay packets is not because they are so smart. It's not because they're so hardworking. It's because they pay no tax. Right? The rest of us, we're all paying tax. The rest of us, we're paying tax to fund roads and electricity grids and schools and NBN networks and hospitals and police forces and judicial systems, all of which those companies use to get richer, and they pay no tax. If you live in Sydney, there are so many potholes in the road. I'm reminded of a line from a book by the late P.J. O'Rourke, Holidays in Hell, where he said, what in the first world constitutes a road hazard, in the third world constitutes the road. That's what Sydney roads are like now. Why? Because big corporations pay no tax. There was a tragic story a couple of years ago, young guy, country New South Wales, as I recall, drove into a tree, was in intensive care, died while he was in intensive care. The reason he died was, in intensive care, you've got to have a nurse on duty 24 hours a day, right? That's why it's called intensive care. This intensive care ward didn't have a nurse on duty 24 hours a day. It had a nurse on duty 16 hours a day, and 8 hours a day it didn't have a nurse on duty. Why did it not have a nurse on duty 8 hours a day? It didn't have the budget. Why didn't they have the budget? because companies like PwC show other companies how to operate in this country and pay no tax. So I went at them hammer and tongs, and I said nasty things about them on LinkedIn. I said nasty things about the CEO. I'm not sorry about that. He earns $4 million a year. He earns $4 million a year to run a criminal enterprise. You don't like me saying nasty things about you? Don't run a criminal enterprise. And if you want to run a criminal enterprise and you paid $4 million a year, here's my advice. Go and put your big boy pants on. Stop whining. Go and put your big boy pants on. One of the things I said about him was, and you might like to, if you can pull this up, his name's Kevin Burrows. I repeated a moniker in which he was called Resting Bulldog Face. And if you Google Kevin Burrows Resting Bulldog Face, you'll find some pictures where he looks like a British bulldog. Yeah, that would be it. Yeah, that one, the one in the top left. Now, you know, Kevo, I've got a big nose, right? Tell me I've got a big nose, I don't fall to pieces. I don't crawl up in a corner and die. I don't start crying. It means nothing to me. Water off a duck's back, mate. Grow up. And I didn't call him Resting Bulldog Face to begin with. The first person to call him Resting Bulldog Face was a journalist by the name of Neil Chenoweth. Oh, that's it. If you can scroll down, Adam, if you've got access to that article, oh, damn, I've got access to that article. Anyway, in that article, Neil Chenoweth says about Kevin Burrows, he says he's got a severe case of resting bulldog face. So I put this on my LinkedIn post. I called Kevin Burrows and I put it in two little horizontal lines. The two little horizontal lines are known in the English-speaking world as inverted commas. Those inverted commas means I'm quoting. So I put in inverted commas, resting bulldog face, and then in brackets behind that, I cited my source, Neil Chenoweth, Australian Financial Review. So Burrows knew I hadn't said this. I was simply repeating what somebody else had said. So he gets hold of his lawyers at Allen's. First irony, right? He doesn't get hold of his lawyers at PwC Legal, because that's not a real law firm. It's a play, pretend bullshit law firm, right? He goes to a real law firm. He goes to Allen's. And he obviously says to Allen's, wah, saying nasty things about me, wah. Can we sue him for defamation? I'm a law professor. I have a rough idea of what you can and cannot sue me for. I know how far I can push it. I hadn't pushed it far enough for them to sue me for defamation. So Allen's probably said to him, no, we can't sue him for defamation. So he says to them, all right, well, what else can we do? So Allen says, we'll try and get him fired. So Allen's, the law firm, on behalf of PwC, wrote to Wollongong University and complained about my LinkedIn posts, and complained that I'd breached the university's rules, and complained that I'd breached the university's social media rules, and demanded all sorts of action be taken against me, and the implication of which, of course, is you should fire him. So the university, you know, I'm not blaming Wollongong Uni. Universities are very risk averse. And having got a letter from Allen's, the law firm, Wollongong University shat itself. And they got hold of me and they went, we've got to have a meeting about this. We've got to meet about this. We've got to meet about this urgently. So I went, okay, everybody stay calm. Let's have a meeting. So the meeting was by Zoom, right? So I'm meeting with the head of HR and the dean of the law school and this one and that one and the next one. They all want to meet with me to discuss these very, very serious allegations. So the first thing they said to me is, apparently you went online and you called Kevin Burrows resting bulldog face. And I went, yeah, so? So did Neil Chenoweth at the Australian Financial Review. Have you heard of the Australian Financial Review? It's a small newspaper. You might have heard of it. It's published all over Australia. Here's the article. Screen share. And they went, oh, okay. But apparently you called them a criminal. Apparently you called them criminals. I went, yeah, here's Hansard. Here's 2 members of parliament calling them criminals. You see, I'd done my research, right? I had done my research. I knew exactly what I could say about them because I knew what was on the public record. So they said, you called them criminals. I went, yeah, so did 2 members of parliament. It's on Hansard. It's in the public domain. It's protected by parliamentary privilege. So they went, oh, okay. But apparently you called them a mafia. I went, yeah. Here's a report written in 2011 by Baron Prem Seeker, the Lord Kingswood, one of the most prominent members of the House of Lords, excuse me, entitled The Pinstriped Mafia, How Big Audit is Destroying Society. And they went, oh. And this went on for about 45 minutes. After about 45 minutes, they said to me, okay, we've seen enough. I went, no. I'm not finished. I've got more. Here are some other things I've said about them. And here's the evidence to back it up. Neil Chenoweth said to me that PwC's lawyers called the Fin Review and they complained to the editor of the Fin Review that Chenoweth had called Burrows resting bulldog face. And according to Neil Chenoweth, the editor of the Fin Review turned around to PwC's lawyers and said to them, read my lips. So when they were told to F off, they came after me. So the university could see they didn't have a leg to stand on. They could see that if they tried to take any steps against me at all, I would go to Fair Work and I would walk up and down their arse. So they went, okay, this matter is closed. I went, no, this matter's not closed. You come after me, it's never closed. I want to see the complaint. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, the complaint was confidential. I wasn't allowed to see the complaint. I had to defend myself against a secret complaint that I wasn't allowed to see. That is a complete denial of natural justice. So I said to the university, I want to see the complaint. They said, well, it's within PwC's gift to determine whether we can show it to you because they've brought their complaint under confidentiality provisions. So they contacted PwC and they said, can we show Professor Schmulow the complaint? PwC said no. Because by this stage, I was getting it reported in the newspapers. And this is what happens. When you shine a bright light on a cockroach, what does the cockroach do? Does it stand up and fight? No. It scurries into a hole like a cockroach. So I said to them, I want to see the complaint. And they said, well, I'm sorry, PwC says you can't see it. So I said, okay, that's fine. We'll go to court. I'm a law professor after all. So I took the university to the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Affairs Tribunal. They hired a big fancy law firm, officers all over the country that specialize in civil and administrative tribunal matters to defend them. Would have cost the university probably $100,000. And the big fancy law firm looked at my statement of claim and my rights under the GIPA Act, the Government Access to Information Act. And they turned around to the university and they said, you don't want to fight this. You might want to just give him the complaint. And do you know why they wouldn't originally give me the complaint? They wouldn't give me the complaint because PwC said, PwC, we are a vulnerable complainant. They're a $3 billion a year revenue business with 1,000 partners, 6,000 employees, and their own law firm. And they're telling us they're the ones who are vulnerable. No. $3 billion assurance firm versus me, and you're the ones who are vulnerable. And this is what PwC does. They manipulate the legal system. They manipulate the complaints system. They manipulate legal professional privilege. If I get into the Senate, I'm going to beat these bastards till my arm gets sore. And do you know why? Because not only are they facilitating tax evasion, these guys have been stealing money from the taxpayer left, right, and center, and it's not only them. PwC charged robo-debt. Remember robo-debt? Scott Morrison's grand plan to hammer the living daylights out of welfare recipients in a scheme that the Royal Commission into robo-debt said the government knew was illegal. They knew it was an illegal scheme. PwC charged robo-debt $1 million for an 8-slide PowerPoint presentation. I want that to sink in. PowerPoint presentation with 8 slides. If somebody asked me, I do consulting work from time to time. If somebody asked me to do a PowerPoint presentation with 8 slides, they said, how much would it cost? I'd say, I don't know, $200, $500. I wouldn't go above 500 because I think above $500 for 8 slides, you're pushing your luck, mate. You're being greedy, you're being dishonest. They didn't charge $500, charged $1 million for an 8-slide PowerPoint presentation. What was on the slides that made them, so that's $125,000 a slide, right? What would have been on those slides that would make them worth $125,000 each? The GPS coordinates for the Yeti, the Earhart baby, and Elvis. It's absolutely scandalous. And it's not only PwC, KPMG charged the Department of Defense $19 million to write a report on whether Australia should build a landing strip for their scientific base in Antarctica. 19 million. Outcome of the report, we advise against building a landing strip. Now, let me tell you how I could have provided that same advice in 30 seconds or less and saved the relevant department $19 million. By the way, my first question is, for $19 million, who's writing this report? Are the people who are writing this report world-renowned authorities in sub-zero, subarctic civil engineering? Because if you don't have a speciality in sub-zero and Arctic civil engineering, what are you doing writing that report in the first place? Like, if you did that in a university, if I went and wrote a report on, I don't know, COVID vaccines, if I went and wrote a report on strip mining, if I went and wrote a report on fracking, I would be torn to shreds by my colleagues. They'd go, where's your expertise in this field? What have you ever written on strip mining or fracking? You don't know anything about this. Who are you to write about this? So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to show your expertise. I want to know the people who wrote that report, were they experts in sub-zero Arctic civil engineering? But be that as it may, here's my advice in 30 seconds or less, save you $19 million. You want to land aircraft in Antarctica. Can they land on packed ice? Because if they can't land on packed ice, can't use those aircraft, and there's no point in building a runway. Because you know what will happen 5 minutes after you've finished building the runway? Be covered in packed ice. So there's no point in building a runway. Bang, I just saved you $19 million. These guys charged for that. They charged for that. And we're paying for this, man. No wonder we're such an overtaxed country. They charged $100 million to the Department of Defense, KPMG, $100 million twice for the same project. I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy. I call that fraud. And when the CEO of KPMG went before Parliament, he was caught lying, as I counted, about 8 times. He was asked whether PwC uses influence maps. Now, influence maps are not illegal, but they are unethical. When a government department awards a contract, it should award the contract based on who will give the taxpayer the best value for money, period. There should be no other criteria. PwC and KPMG and Deloitte and Ernst & Young, they use this technique called influence maps. So they get a map with pictures of all the relevant bigwigs in the department, what their names are, what their titles are, and then they put notes underneath whether that person is approachable and amenable to giving them a contract. So it's a way of, it's a graphical representation for how we can get our hooks into a government department and suck money out of the taxpayer. $21 billion over the last 10 years is how much we've paid these bloody consultants to write bogus reports. So Andrew Yates, the CEO of PwC, went before Parliament, and Senator Barbara Pocock said to him, do you use influence maps? No, we don't use influence maps. She said, really? What's this? She held up an influence map. She said, what do you call this? It's from KPMG. It's got the pictures of all the people in the department, little traffic lights, red, green, yellow, whether they will give you a contract or whether you should stay away from them and go around them, go around their back, go behind their back, go to someone else to get the contract. He said, we don't call that an influence map. We call that a something else. We call that a, I can't remember what other kind of map he called it. There, that's the picture. Yep, we call it.
I think they called it a power map.
A power map. We call it a power map. That was his wank word du jour, a power map. So Senator O'Neill interrupted Senator Pocock, and she said, I just want to point out that this question that Mr. Yates is answering was a question that was provided to KPMG on notice. Now that's very significant, Adam. It's very significant because if you provide a question on notice, then the question is a written question and you provide a written response. So there's no danger of you saying, I misspoke in the moment. In the moment I misspoke. In the moment I said the wrong thing. You were asked the question in writing. You responded in writing. Let's remind ourselves what the question was. The question was, do you use any kind of mapping or graphical representation to show who is who in a department, what their names and titles are, and whether they are well disposed or otherwise towards you so that you can get contracts from them? These are sometimes called influence maps, or they are sometimes called power maps, but it doesn't matter what name they go by. Do you ever do something like this? So Senator O'Neill had set the question up in such a way there was no ways this guy could wheedle and squirm like a cockroach around the question and go, I misspoke in the moment, or I didn't understand the question. Him and his executive leadership sat down and they looked at the question and they decided with malice of forethought to lie. And I'll tell you why that pisses me off. It's the disrespect. And by that, I don't mean the disrespect to Deb O'Neill or Barbara Pocock or David Pocock or Andrew Bragg or any other senator. The individual senators are irrelevant. It's not disrespect to them. It's the disrespect to who they represent. And who do they represent? Us. We the people. And if you won't respect we the people in this democracy, then take your operation to North Korea. And not only are you treating the democratically elected representatives of we the people with unbridled contempt, at the same time, you're sucking down hundreds of millions of dollars from the taxpayer in government-funded projects. It's insult to injury. So liar Yates, having been caught lying, then went back before Parliament 3 months later, and this is what he said. Scumbag. He said, I just want to apologize. Last time we appeared here, we interpreted the question too narrowly. Bing! That's a lie. You didn't interpret it too narrowly, buddy boy. The question was crystal clear. Do you use graphical representation to determine who in a government department will give you a contract? Sometimes these are called influence maps. Sometimes they're called power maps, but it doesn't matter what they're called. Do you use them? So don't come here and lie again and say we interpreted it too narrowly. You didn't interpret it too narrowly. You decided to lie. So that's now, do you use power maps? No. What's this? It's not a power map. What is it then? Sorry, do you use influence maps? No. What is this? It's not an influence map. What is it? It's a power map. Sorry, we interpreted the question too narrowly. That's now the fourth lie. So then Senator Pocock says to him, okay. Before you appeared here today, we asked you to give us further examples of any power maps that you use. Have you done that? Yes, said Andrew Yates. That's line number 5. Pocock holds up a sheet of paper, or Deb O'Neill holds up a piece of paper. She says, is this the only other power map you have in play at the moment? Is this the only other power map in existence? Yes, says Yates. That's line number 6. O'Neill says, this is not a power map. This is an organizational chart from a government department, and it took us 2 minutes on the internet, searching the internet, to find where you got it. You plagiarized it, you copied and pasted it from the government department's website, turned it from portrait mode to landscape mode, and put your name at the top. And now you're telling us that's a power map. It's not a power map. It's an organizational chart from the government department. So that's line number 7. Now we're asking you for the third and last time, are there any other power maps that you use? No, says Yates. That's line number 8. Because Pocock then holds up, or Deborah O'Neill holds up, another power map, this time of the health department, that they haven't declared. This is an assurance firm. I want to bring that home to your viewers. This is an assurance firm. It's not a panel beater. It's not a bikie gang. This is not a meth lab. This is not an inherently criminal organization. This is an assurance firm. This is a firm upon which investors rely to make sure that the annual statements and the annual financial statements are true and correct. This is a firm upon which people rely because it issues certificates that this particular firm is compliant with OH&S, or this firm is compliant with whistleblower protection, or this firm is compliant with a sexual harassment policy. We rely on these firms to be gatekeepers for honesty across the length and breadth of everything to do with our economy. And the CEO goes before Parliament and he lies on 2 occasions, 8 times. And we are shoveling money into this firm like there's no tomorrow. Let me give you another example. This is one of my favorites, right? National Health and Medical Research Council paid KPMG, I don't know how many millions of dollars, to write a report on research ethics and research integrity. They wrote the report, and the report was put in the public domain, and there was a group of people, I can't remember what their name is, they check for false citations. And they found that there was at least one footnote in that report that was a resource that doesn't exist. And bad news for KPMG, one of the guys who runs this website where they check for false footnotes, he was the guy who KPMG had made up the footnote about. So he goes in the media and he says, this report has got a footnote pointing to something that I'm supposed to have written. This doesn't exist. I've never written anything like it. So KPMG scrambles, and the National Health and Medical Research Council scrambles. And they turn around and they go, yes, that footnote shouldn't have been there. KPMG has amended the report. As if problem solved, case closed. Nah. Guess where bogus footnotes come from? Guess where made up, invented footnotes that sound real, that sound legitimate, that sound plausible? I write a lot on financial regulation. So let's say a footnote that goes, Schmulow, Andy, 2024, How to Fix Financial Regulation in Australia, Journal of Banking and Finance Law. Very specific, very plausible sounding. I've never written an article like that. So where do these kind of invented footnotes that sound plausible come from? And I'll tell you where they come from, because I'm a university professor and I mark students' assignments. Guess who makes up footnotes? Have a guess, Adam.
I guess the students writing it would make up the footnotes, wouldn't they?
No, they're not smart enough. Guess who makes up footnotes?
If it wasn't them, I'd be thinking artificial intelligence if they were cheating on them.
GPT.
Yep, AI.
Chat GPT. Every time, I've got a student right now. She's written an assignment. I check the footnotes. I'm very pernickety, very meticulous about that kind of stuff. I'm very hair-splitty. I'm very I want to know exactly where this is from. So I check this guy's footnotes that don't exist. So I know where he got them. He used ChatGPT. So he's going to fail the subject and he's going to be in a lot of trouble. And I'm going to make sure he's punished good and hard because I warned them, don't cheat. KPMG got ChatGPT to write a report for the National Health and Medical Research Council. They got ChatGPT to write the report for them, lazy bastards. Charged the National Health and Medical Research Council, I don't know how many millions, which means they charged us, the taxpayer. And guess what the report was on? And this is where the irony is so exquisite and so withering. Guess what the report was on? Research ethics. This is the same firm which I think was it 2020, I think it was, where 1,000 of their employees were caught cheating on an exam. And what was the exam about? Integrity. These guys are just cockroaches. Cockroaches gorging themselves on the public purse. It's one of the reasons why I want to go to the Senate. Because if you know what questions to ask, and if you're willing to be on the front foot, and if you're willing to be, dare I say it, a little bit aggressive, and you're willing to be uncompromising, and you are willing to go there and not take 1 penny from a corporate donor, then no one has any power over you. Then you can go to Parliament and you can get a big stick and you can beat these guys till your arm gets sore. And what do you achieve in the process? Better government. What do you achieve in the process? A solution to the cost of living crisis. Why is there a cost of living crisis? Because we've got a supermarket duopoly. Not my opinion. That's the opinion of the Productivity Commission. They issued a report a month ago. They said that Coles and Woolworths are a duopoly. They said that Coles and Woolworths are now the most profitable supermarkets in the world. They said that Coles and Woolworths have increased their margins from their margins are now higher post-COVID than they were pre-COVID. So what's the solution to that problem? You give the ACCC a divestiture power and you say to them, go and break up Coles and Woolworths. The two major parties, the Liberals and the Diet Liberals, fewer calories, same great liberal taste, same two sides of the same coin, two cheeks to the same arse, they won't touch Coles and Woolworths. Why? Because they donate to their political campaigns, right? I won't touch corporate donations. When I went before the Coles and Woolworths inquiry, let me give you a little bit of an insight there. I had the very great privilege to assist one of the crossbench senators, Senator McKim. And he asked me to help him prepare some questions to ask Coles and Woolworths. And I got help from a colleague of mine. This is the other great thing being an academic, right? You go and ask your colleagues for help. You want to know whether the report into an airstrip in Antarctica was credible? Go and ask people in the civil engineering department. They'll know. You want to know whether Coles and Woolworths are gouging customers? Go and ask someone in the accounting department to help you understand the annual report, which I did. So I took the annual report. This is before the Productivity Commission told us they're the most profitable supermarkets in the world. And we had a look at Coles and Woolworths' return on equity. Yeah, that's a picture of me appearing at the Senate inquiry. We had a look at Coles and Woolworths' return on equity. Now, return on equity, for your viewers who are accounting graduates or who are accountants, they will know that return on equity is not the only way to measure the performance of a company. 100%, I concede that. But it's one way. It is one way to evaluate the performance of a company. There are others, after tax profit and before tax profit and MBFT or whatever it's called. But return on equity is a legitimate way to evaluate the performance of a company. And by return on equity, I saw that our supermarkets, like Coles is 3 times more profitable than the average of our banking industry. And our banking industry is the most profitable banking industry by return on equity in the world. Supermarkets in America have a return on equity of about 1.4%. 1.4. Coles, 34. And then Coles turns around and goes, oh, it's got nothing to do with us, the cost of living. Oh, it's not our fault. Oh, it's the suppliers. Bullshit. Bullshit. You're gouging us. And not only are you gouging us, you're not even a duopoly. Productivity Commission says you're a duopoly. You're not. You're a monopoly. The significant shareholders of Coles and Woolworths are the same investment funds: BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. It's a monopoly with 2 names. And the only reason why BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street don't say to Coles and Woolworths, well, let's just stop this ruse, combine and call yourselves Colesworth, is because even BlackRock knows that if it was reduced to one supermarket, there would be irresistible pressure from the public to break it up. And why shouldn't there be pressure to break it up? When I came to this country, there was Bilo, there was Franklin's, there was Safeway. What happened to those supermarkets? Those were national supermarkets over and above all the state-based supermarkets. What happened to Coles? What happened to Bilo and Franklin's and Safeway? They were gobbled up by Woolworths and they were gobbled up by Coles because the ACCC doesn't have the power in the legislation to say, stop. We are not allowing this merger to go through. Okay, well, there's a place where you need to fix it. There's the first place you need to fix it. ACCC, give them the power, stop these kind of things happening in the future, but that's not going to fix what's happened in the past. How do we fix what's happened in the past? Break up those monopolies. So I said to Senator McKim, these guys have got the highest return on equity in the world. When they appear before you, you must ask them to tell you what their return on equity is. Not because we don't know. We know. But you got to get them to say the words. You got to get them to say the words 28% and 34%. Because when they say those words, it demolishes their narrative. And I said to Senator McKim, no matter how many times they refuse to, I said to him they might refuse to answer that question. No matter how many times they refuse to answer that question, Senator McKim, you have got to hold the line. You have got to make them say those words. So Brad Banducci appeared. Brad Banducci was the CEO of Woolworths. He appeared before Senator McKim. I flew up to Canberra that morning to go and give evidence. I got off the plane, turned on my phone, went to the live stream of the Senate inquiry, and I see Senator McKim saying to Brad Banducci, I've asked you what your return on equity is 27 times. If you don't answer that question, it's up to us to hold you in contempt, and you can face a prison sentence of 6 months. That's what you got to do. When these guys won't answer the question, you remind them. Do you know where you are? You are in the temple of democracy, my friend. You are in the highest chamber of democracy in our democracy. And when you come into this place, you will bend the knee. You will bend the knee not out of respect or fealty to me, but out of respect and fealty for who I represent, we the people. And if you don't like that, take your operation and piss off. And that's the kind of straight for the jugular that we need in Parliament. I've seen some of the comments about Rennick. Rennick is a fantastic guy. I've got a lot of respect for Rennick, and the way Rennick has been treated by the Liberal Party is a disgrace. I absolutely hope he gets back in. I've got a lot of respect for people across the political spectrum who I've worked with closely. Adam, I've appeared before about a dozen parliamentary inquiries in the last 2 years. And I don't want this to sound like a boast, but it's not intended to be a boast. It's intended just to tell you what I've achieved. I've appeared before about a dozen Senate inquiries in the last 2 years. Every single inquiry I've appeared before, every single inquiry that I've made submissions to has adopted my recommendations, either in major part or in their entirety in the report. Bank branch closures, supermarkets, airlines, ASIC, financial accountability regime. Every time I go before Parliament and I make recommendations, because I base my recommendations in the absolute best research I can do, and I base those recommendations on the best examples that we can find anywhere in the world. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The world is full of smart people. And if there are smart people in, I don't know, South Korea, the South Koreans have got a fantastic piece of legislation to prevent the revolving door. Copy it. We don't need to copy only from the United Kingdom. If there's something good out there, copy it. I go before Parliament and I show them the absolute best solutions from anywhere in the world. And my recommendations get adopted in whole or in their entirety in every one of those reports. You know what happens then? Nothing. Nothing happens. Why? Because the Liberal Party and the Diet Liberal Party are too scared to piss off their major donors. Mate,
this all actually links to my very first question at the beginning. My apologies for interrupting, but it goes back to who's in charge. And I just want to put something to you to get your insight on it. So as you're speaking here, the comments are blowing up. The people are very hungry for this type of passion. They're hungry for the truth. They're hungry for transparency. Professor, have you read Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
No.
A very powerful book that I highly recommend that you read. And basically it's on the premise of the economic hitmen going around the world, influencing countries to act in a certain way. And at the beginning of this video, I said, who's in charge? And I said, have you ever been threatened? And the reason why I said that is because it seems that whoever stands up to the narrative, they're either silenced, there's false accusations put against them, they're put in prison, or in the extreme example, they're murdered. When planes crash these days, the first thing that I ask is when the plane hits the ground, and I hear about it, my first question isn't, in fact, what caused the accident? My first question is who was on the plane. And the reason why I ask that is because there seems to be perhaps some type of power out there. I don't know, I'm very ignorant in what I'm speaking about here, but I seek the truth. Is that it seems that anyone who stands up to the centralized systems, they get shot down one way or another, either physically, literally, or metaphorically. And this is why I'm concerned in Australia and perhaps around the world when people want to stand up and actually expose the truth. Even when that truth is exposed, nothing actually happens. And this is where I believe also many Australians are pulling away from the political system because they see Labor and Liberal as two wings of the same bird. We are misled, I believe, in the mainstream media when we have debates on television for the next Prime Minister, that they only have two men standing on the stage, one party from the left, one party from the right, implying to Australia that we only have two choices. This all leads into the question, you're financially successful in what you've done. You've chosen to be an Australian, which I'm very, if you will, humbled by. What is your drive? What is your passion to do this when there's no need at an individual level for you to do any of this, to run for a senator seat for New South Wales? There's probably no fiscal benefit for you doing so. There's probably no mental benefit for you doing so with the amount of perhaps slurs against you and legal battles against you. What's the motivation?
I'm a grumpy old man and I'm pissed off and I hate injustice. I hate it. I grew up in South Africa.
What was the tipping point? Sorry to interrupt. What was the tipping point?
The tipping point in Australia, or the tipping point, or what made me hate injustice?
What made you run for senator?
I'll tell you what the tipping point was. It's a bit of a technical explanation, and I don't want to bore your audience, so I'm going to try and explain this as best I can. For those of you who don't remember, 6 years ago, we had a Royal Commission of Inquiry into misconduct in our financial industry. Our banks are run like criminal enterprises. And, you know, I have this habit of making outrageous statements. People say to me, "You make such outrageous statements." I go, "Yeah," and then I back them up. There's a piece of legislation in the United States called RICO, the Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act. The United States is not an outlier jurisdiction, still the biggest economy in the world, although Donald Trump is rapidly dismantling that. RICO is a piece of legislation that was enacted, I think, in about a long time ago, 1920s maybe. And it is a piece of legislation designed to combat organized crime, the mafia. And to be deemed a mafia organization, to be deemed a racket, you need to breach 2 or more of the, I think, 36, if memory serves, 36 definitions contained in the Act of what constitutes a criminal enterprise, right? So there are about 36 definitions of what constitutes a criminal enterprise, and if you breach 2 or more of them, then you are liable to be deemed a mafia organization. I estimated that Commonwealth Bank had breached about 12. Money laundering, stealing money out of people's accounts, forging signatures. It's a long list. If Commonwealth Bank was operating in the United States, Commonwealth Bank would be liable to be deemed a criminal enterprise, a mafia organization. And that pissed me off. And then what pissed me off even more was our regulator, ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, let me try and think of a suitable metaphor. ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, has the responsibility of preventing this kind of stuff from happening. ASIC is like a remora fish. You know the little fish that swim around underneath a shark or a whale's asshole? That's what ASIC is like. It is the weakest, most cowardly, pathetic regulator in the Western world. And that was confirmed by the Royal Commission. Pathetic. And what the Royal Commission said was, we need legislation. We need legislation to ensure that if an executive in a bank is made aware of criminal conduct, not that they themselves are committing criminal conduct, right? Let's understand this. If somebody comes to the bank executive and says to the bank executive, "Sir, madam, there's evidence that we are stealing money from our customers." And that bank executive turns around and says, "Don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it. You worry too much." That actually happened, by the way. The current CEO of Commonwealth Bank, a guy by the name of Matt Coman, gave testimony at the Royal Commission, and in his testimony he said that when he was the CEO of the retail division of Commonwealth Bank, he went to the group CEO, a guy by the name of Ian Narev, who was paid $13 million in his last year as CEO. He went to the group CEO, Ian Narev, and he said to him, "Mr. Narev, I have evidence that we are breaking the law. I have evidence that we are charging credit card insurance to customers who are automatically ineligible for that insurance. So it's junk insurance, right? You sell junk insurance, you're breaking the law. You breach Section 912 capital A of the Corporations Act. And according to Matthew Coman's testimony, the then CEO, Ian Narev, on $13 million a year, turned around to him and said to him, Matt, you need to temper your sense of injustice. Guess what that means? You worry too much. Yeah, don't worry about it. Look the other way. Conform to perform. Get along to go along. Turn a blind eye. Those 250,000 customers who are paying for junk insurance, that adds to our profit. That adds to our bottom line, buddy boy. And the more profit we make, the better. Because the more profit we make, it's better for a very important stakeholder. And guess who that stakeholder is, Adam?
Probably those who pay them.
Which stakeholder is it? Which stakeholder do you think it's so important to make sure you make profit for?
Shareholders?
Not the shareholders. Wrong. We're all made to think it's the shareholders. It's not the shareholders, it's bank executives and their bonuses. They hide behind this rubric of I'm doing it for the shareholders, love the shareholders, want to do what's right for the... They don't give a rat's ass about the shareholders. All they care about is their own bonus. And if they get another $1 million in their bonus, if the profitability of the bank goes from 30 billion to 31 billion, well, the 250,000 customers that you're ripping off with credit card insurance might make the difference. Could be the difference between me getting a $12 million bonus and a $13 million bonus. So temper your sense of injustice. So the Royal Commission said, in situations like that, in situations where an executive person in the bank turns a blind eye to misconduct, we have got to hold them accountable. Well, that's good. That sounds reasonable to me. That sounds like a fair thing to do. So the government enacted legislation called the Financial Accountability Regime Act, the FAR Act. And then the Senate had an inquiry into the FAR Act. And I looked at the FAR Act, and guess what I found? Let me think how to explain this so that I don't bore your viewers into switching off. There's a section in the FAR Act. It's called Section 21. Section 21 says, if you're a bank executive, responsible person to use the terminology in the legislation, but if you are a bank executive and you turn a blind eye to misconduct, then we will hold you accountable. It's not unreasonable. Somebody comes to you and says to you, you're breaking the law. All that you're expected to do is say, okay, well, we'll take steps to stop breaking the law. That's all. It doesn't hold bank executives accountable for everything that goes wrong. It doesn't hold them accountable for things that they have no idea about. It only holds them accountable if they are warned, sir, madam, we are breaking the law, and they go, don't worry about it. Section 21. Great, perfect, awesome, that's exactly what we need. But then if you go, and here it gets a bit complicated, and I'm not going to bore your viewers, but essentially what it involves is, if you go to Section 83, subsection 3, note 2, it then refers you to Section 81, which then refers you to Section 79, subsection 2 of the Regulatory Powers Act, which then refers you back to Section 21, and it says Section 21 cannot be enforced. The whole thing's a farce, right? And if your viewers want to check this out, go and look it up. Section 83, subsection 3, note 2. will refer you to Section 81. Section 81 will give you a definition of which sections can be held against an individual, only civil penalty provisions. To know what a civil penalty provision is, you've then got to go to Section 79, subsection 2 of the Regulatory Powers Act, which will tell you what a civil penalty provision is. You then go back to Section 21. You see Section 21 is not a civil penalty provision, which means it is null and void. So this is a complex deception, that's a great comment, the Farce Act. This is a complex deception that is put in place by the legislature and put in place by Treasury, Federal Treasury. Federal Treasury did this. I have no doubt they did this for a reason, which I'll come back to. They did this so that the public will think something's being done. Nothing's being done. It's all just smoke and mirrors. So I went before Parliament and I explained to the Senate committee headed by Labour Senator Dr Jess Walsh, and I explained to them in exhaustive detail how this whole thing is a farce and a smoke and mirrors trick, and how the legislation will not do the single most important thing it's supposed to do. The single most important thing it's supposed to do, of course, is to hold bank executives accountable. So again, Senator McKim from the Greens took up my advice, and he got very hot under the collar about the fact that this legislation was a trick, and he demanded that this be fixed. So he demanded that Section 21 be made into a civil penalty provision. And there was an article that appeared, maybe you can pull this up, $1 million fines back for bankers. It appeared on the 22nd or the 23rd of November 2022 in the Sydney Morning Herald in an article written by Rachel Clun. Her surname is spelled C-L-U-N. I'll put her surname, $1 million fines for dodgy bankers. There you go. You are just absolutely dynamite with the stuff, Adam. Would you like to be my research assistant? So on the 23rd of November 2022, Rachel Clun announces that this evil deception, this pathetic deception that has been put in place by these corrupt officials at Federal Treasury has been fixed. And I'm absolutely delighted with all of this. My recommendations have been adopted. My advice has been followed. These bastards on Macquarie Street and Collins Street who are financially raping this country. Time's up, boys. Time's up, boys. Your behavior will no longer be tolerated, boys, because it's a boys' club, yep. 3 or 4, maybe a week later, it's announced, same journalist, same newspaper, on I think the 3rd of December, she wrote an article entitled "Deal or No Deal?" ? Maybe you can find that. Rachel Clun, Sydney Morning Herald, "Deal or No Deal?" ? And it was announced about a week later that the Australian Bankers Association, there you go, the rapid rise and fall of fines for bankers. So there it is. The Australian Banking Association and the CEOs of the big 4 banks picked up the phone and they called up the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, and they called up the Treasurer, his name's just popped out of my mind. What's his name again? Jim Chalmers. The CEOs of the big 4 banks got on the phone to Jim Chalmers and Stephen Jones, and they said to Jimmy boy, "Hey, Jimmy boy, you've forgotten who you work for. You've forgotten who you are owned by, boy. Have you forgotten who your master is? You don't put fines on us, little boy. We own you. We bought you, and we paid for you, and now you are our property. So you take that stuff out of the act immediately." And what did Jim Chalmers and Stephen Jones do? They groveled. They grovelled and they took the change out of the legislation. And so in November of last year, we hear that ANZ Bank is still charging customers who are dead. They are still thieving from the dead. They are still stealing from corpses. And what consequences will be brought against the CEO of ANZ Bank, Shane Elliott, Shane-O from the Draino? None. And what consequences will be brought against the head of his retail division, Maylee Carnegie? What consequences will she suffer? She got a $900,000 bonus. Never changes. And the only way to change it is to go to Parliament and not take money from big corporations. And I tell you, Adam, the risk that I face is not that I would go to Parliament and somebody would be able to bribe me. The risk that I face is that I'll go to Parliament and somebody will try and bribe me, and then I'll be on an assault charge. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that should be a defence to assault, to a charge of assault. I'm a public official and this mongrel tried to bribe me, so I punched him in the head.
It's so powerful that it's almost scary. It's scary in the sense that, again, I'm not sure who's in charge. The way I looked at it when I was speaking with Martin North many times is that if you look at the political landscape, you've got politicians who are in place. Let's go with the Prime Minister as an example. So the Prime Minister is trying to appease his party, and if he doesn't, he'll be fired overnight. This is where we have this rotating doors of Prime Ministers. You'd wake up every morning and there'll be a different Prime Minister. So he's got to appease the party. He's got to appease the voters. He's got to appease the media because they'll have their own narrative. But then what I'm really learning here is that you must appease those with the money, the lobbyists, those who pay you to get you into that position. And that's why I'm not convinced. Many people have said to me, Adam, why don't you get in politics? And I said, well, I think one of the least powerful people in the country is, in fact, probably the Prime Minister, for the reasons that I just described. They can't actually lead, irrespective of what side of the aisle they're on. They're facing all of these challenges. And it probably leads me into the question is that I've wondered why Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights. So we've seen the MAD bill being introduced where they tried to silence us and only certain people were allowed to speak. We saw breaches of what we signed up for the Nuremberg Treaty when we were forced, many of us were forced to take the vax, but federal judges and politicians were exempt from that. That was a breach of the treaty that we signed after, I believe, the Second World War. And so I think many people are disheartened when it comes to voting. Some people will waste their vote in the sense that they believe that their vote won't make any difference. I've got a super chat here. Maybe you could weave into, perhaps, do you think we should be a republic to give the people more power? And as you were saying before, I really liked what you said about adapting or taking pieces of other people's models, whether it's South Korea or America or anyone. We don't have to always be in the Westminster system. We could, in fact, evolve into our own system. Dan Harrison gave us a super chat and he says, great show so far. Can we discuss how the cost of living crisis is due to broken money and the duopolies are a symptom, not the cause? What are our immediate fixes? So a lot to unpack there, but you get into politics, you are successful in winning your campaign, you're a senator, what do you do?
What do I do? The current government doesn't control the Senate, and they definitely won't control it after the next election because they're set to lose support, but they won't be in control of both houses of Parliament. That means that the government can't get its legislation passed unless it gets its legislation passed also by the Senate, right? I can work with people in the Senate. I certainly cannot and would never aspire to being a government of one person. You have got to work with other people, and there are people that I have worked with very extensively and very productively over the last 2 years on both sides of the aisle in the Senate. Senator Bragg, Liberal Party. Senator O'Neill, Labour Party. Senator Pocock, Greens. Senator David Pocock, Independent. Senator Rennick, I would love to work with him. You find like-minded people, and you only need 3 or 4 of them, and you've got the balance of power. right? 5 or 6, you've definitely got it, right? If you've got 5 or 6 senators in a block, that's enough to stop the government passing its legislation. You then turn around to the government and you say to them, sorry to have to put it in this terminology, but we're holding you to ransom. You won't get anything passed in the Senate. You won't get anything passed in Parliament for the next 3 years unless you do the following. There are at least 4, maybe 5 Senate inquiries that have made recommendations. The Financial Accountability Regime Act, Bank Branch Closure Inquiry, Supermarket Inquiry, ASIC Inquiry, Airline Customer Rights Inquiry. All of those parliamentary inquiries, PwC, 6. All of those Senate inquiries made excellent recommendations. At the time, you went, yes, that's great recommendation, yes. And then we didn't hear another thing. Well, guess what, boys? Until such time as you adopt and legislate every single one of those recommendations, you won't get anything passed in Parliament. So, Bragg, O'Neill, Pocock, other Pocock, Rennick, might not agree with everything he stands for, but Malcolm Roberts, myself, 6 senators. Maybe you have to drop one of them because they're the majority party. All right, but you're down to 5. 5 senators in the Senate. Nick Bakim back up to 6. Wish Wilson, 7. 1 or 2 other independents. Maybe you've got 8. More than enough to hold the balance of power. And then you make it clear to the government. All the stuff you've been doing that's tinkering around the edges because you won't take on the big corporations, those days are over, at least for the next 3 years. So understand what is being said to you. You will be a lame duck government which will pass no legislation, or those 6 Senate reports, you're going to adopt every one of those recommendations. And if Coles and Woolworths arcs up, if Commonwealth and ANZ and NAB and Westpac arc up, if Qantas and PwC and KPMG and Deloitte and Ernst & Young arc up, guys, throw me under the bus. They're not my friends. They don't donate to my campaign. I don't give a shit about them, right? And I don't care if they hate me. Hate me. I draw power from your hatred. The more you hate me, the better I feel. The more people like that hate me, the more I know I'm doing a good job. So by all means, throw me under the bus, tell them you've got no alternative. That bloody Senator Schmulow, he's making your life hell, but unfortunately we have to give the ACCC a divestiture power. Then watch the changes. Watch the changes to the cost of living. Somebody said it's about broken money. I can tell you, it doesn't matter whether you're paying in Australian dollars or Bitcoin. Coles and Woolworths is going to continue gouging you, right? It doesn't matter whether you're paying in Australian dollars or Dogecoin. Qantas is going to continue gouging you. And the reason they gouge is because they're not held to account. And the reason they're not held to account is because the Liberal and Labour Party, the Liberal and the Diet Liberal Party, are bought by and sold to those corporate donors. Qantas buys and owns politicians through membership of the Qantas Chairman's Lounge. This has been very well documented by a very well-known and highly respected Australian journalist called Joe Aston. He's written a book called The Qantas Chairman's Lounge. I don't think that's quite the title, but maybe Adam can put it up. Qantas controls our politicians by giving them access to a lounge. I'm a member of a lounge. I use the Virgin Lounge. I fly Virgin because I support the underdog. And Virgin gives me access to their lounge, not because they're trying to bribe me. I get access to their lounge because I fly a lot. If you fly more than a certain amount, you are automatically entitled to membership of their lounge. It's not a gift that they give me, right? I'm entitled to it under the contract that I have with them. And if they didn't give it to me, I'd sue them for breach of contract. So this is not a gift to me. If I fly enough on Virgin, I get to use their lounge, right? And if you fly enough on Qantas, you get to use their ordinary lounge. But the chairman's lounge, that's a gift. That's a gift that's only given to very special people. The chairman's lounge is a gift that is given to every single one of our politicians. That means they never have to wait in a queue. They never have to queue to board. They never get pinged for having luggage that's too heavy. They never have to wait on hold to get through to Qantas if they've got a problem. They never have to wait to get a refund on a ticket. And if they're a member of the Qantas Chairman's Lounge, they get automatic free upgrades for them and their family to business class, or if they're flying business class, to first class, wherever they fly. If Albanese takes his wife and kids, or if Dutton takes his wife and kids on holiday to Italy, on holiday, not parliamentary business, holiday, and they fly Qantas to Italy, they will all be upgraded to business class, Chairman's Lounge benefit. This is a bribe. Now, the politicians will turn around and they'll say, it's not a bribe because we declare it. Mate, I don't care if you tattoo it to your goddamn forehead. It's still a bribe. You have taken a bribe from Qantas, which is why Qantas, during COVID, got a $2 billion bailout, but Virgin didn't. Virgin, when it came to Virgin going bankrupt, the Morrison government was like, oh, we can't bail out companies. But Qantas got a $2.7 billion taxpayer-funded, tax-free bailout during COVID called JobKeeper. And while they got their JobKeeper subsidy, they fired 1,700 workers illegally. Why? Because these politicians are members of the Qantas Chairman's Lounge. And let me tell you something. Like I said, I'm a member of the Virgin Lounge. I always get to the airport an hour before my flight leaves, and I have to board half an hour before the flight leaves. So I have half an hour in the lounge. Always. I never get there more than an hour before because I've got better things to do with my life than sit in an airport lounge. In the half an hour that I'm in the lounge, I have a free sandwich and a Diet Coke. I don't drink alcohol, so that's what I get, a sandwich and a Diet Coke. So if Vanessa Hudson, the CEO of Qantas, offered me membership of the Chairman's Lounge, effectively what she's offering is to bribe me with the cost of a sandwich and a Diet Coke. And you know what, Adam? That's beneath my dignity. I find that very insulting. So if I got elected and Vanessa Hudson sent me an invitation to join the Qantas Chairman's Lounge, and I very much doubt she would be that stupid, but if she did, I would go on national television, I'd get out a cigarette lighter and I would burn that damn thing on national television because I am not available to be purchased.
Allow me to share a story with you that will probably fire you up. By way of background, I'm a veteran. I served 20 years in uniform. And I recall in my very early days as a soldier having to travel a lot. There was a company, as you may recall, called Ansett. And when Ansett existed, we had access to the Qantas Club for defence members at $100. Ansett was so kind and accommodating to Australian soldiers that sometimes when the Qantas Club, certain airports that didn't exist or it was closed or for whatever reason you couldn't get in, you could go to the Ansett Business Lounge and they would let you in for free, even though you weren't a member of it. The day that Ansett...
If you were a veteran. If you were a veteran.
If you were a serving member or a veteran, I suppose. But certainly, I just showed my military ID and Ansett was wonderful. They just let me straight in. And Qantas also would let soldiers join, or soldiers, sailors, airmen, and officers join for $100 a year. It was a pretty good deal. I recall clearly the day that Ansett went bust, the membership went from approximately $100 per year for soldiers, sailors, and airmen to $500 a year. So it quintupled overnight. That's not the bit that gets me the most, Andy. The thing that gets me the most, I'll share a quick story with you. And part of the reasons why I find it very difficult to believe that Qantas is for Australia. when I was an airfield defence guard, I was at university, and East Timor kicked up, and under Howard, he recalled pretty much all ready reservists to deploy to East Timor in a peacekeeping operation. So I was called up. I had to defer university. I had to quit my job. I broke up with my girlfriend, sold my car, and I had to deploy from Canberra to RAF Base Amberley for pre-deployment training. Now, as a soldier, typically what you take is you take your webbing, which is your kit that you wear. You take your pack, this is all combat stuff, and then you take an echelon bag. That echelon bag contains some personal stuff like a towel, a jumper, maybe toiletries, and a book. When I arrived at Canberra Airport, ready to basically serve my country, the lady at the counter said, "No, you're only allowed 2 pieces of checked luggage." And I said, "Oh, look, I'm really sorry." I said, I'm just about to deploy. I've been called up to go to Timor. Is there any way you've got some type of defense thing where I can get my equipment to go?" And she was adamant. She said, "No, you're only allowed 2 pieces of checked luggage." I said, "Look, fair enough. I will pay for the additional luggage." And she said, "No, we're not going to allow that either. The plane's full." So as a soldier deploying for Australia, flying on an Australian carrier ready for pre-deployment training, I wasn't allowed by this Australian carrier to take my kit to serve my country. So I had to make the very difficult choice, which was, as a soldier, it's a very clear choice what you take. You take your webbing and pack. And I had to leave my echelon bag behind. So I deployed forward, basically without all of my kit, because Qantas wouldn't allow me to take it, even if I tried to pay. And the salt in the wound, Andy, was when I got on the aircraft, the bloody thing wasn't even full. So most of the seats were empty on the aircraft. So there was absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever that this massive aircraft was not capable of taking one extra bag. And many years later, decades later, I feel deeply betrayed by the Australian carrier that basically denied an Australian soldier taking his kit on operations in service for the country. Timor was no secret of what was happening. I wasn't taking a fridge. I wasn't taking heaps of bags. It was literally my webbing, my pack, and my echelon bag. Very standard issue kit for a soldier to deploy to war. Now we hear the other side of this, where you have the chairman's lounge, that those at the very top, the elected officials, they never get allegedly any pushback on additional luggage. They get upgraded to business class. In more than 3 decades of flying with Qantas, I've never once been upgraded. I've seen that as an Australian serving member. I've had my membership of the Qantas lounge, which I no longer pay for, go up quintupled when Ansett collapsed. This is to the absolute best of my memory. And when I deploy to serve my country, they don't allow me to take my kit. So then when I see so many bailouts, if you will, directly or indirectly for this company, and so many perks for those at the very top, it's very disheartening. And you also made me remember, as a boy, I remember clearly there was Jules and Franklin's, and IGA was bigger, and Woolworths and Coles, and there was all these supermarkets. And now there only appears to be 2. And some might say, well, there's 3 with Aldi and perhaps 4 with IGA. But there's no doubt in my mind that it looks more like a cartel, or at least a oligopoly or a monopoly, if they're all acting as one. And you've also mentioned that when you have the big players, Qantas, Colesworth, which we say in Australia to represent 2 supermarkets perceived by the people acting as one, KPMG, PwC, Ernst & Young, and Deloitte. In my mind, it seems like, and I could be wrong, I ask this question as a matter of ignorance, you've got these big companies, Qantas, Colesworth, KPMG, PwC, Ernst & Young, and Deloitte. Are they running the country?
And them and the Australian Banking Association.
And the banks, of course. So what hope in hell
and can I say,
please?
I thank you for your service. And I am heartbroken to hear this story that you've told me. I find it personally offensive.
I will never forget it. I will never, ever forget when Qantas stopped, and it wasn't about me. It was about an Australian soldier deploying, and they said no, even when I begged to pay, and even when the plane was empty.
Yep.
And this is who we bail out of.
You could have a goddamn book to read while you were defending your country's interests abroad.
Or my toiletries.
Yep. From a company that has sucked down billions upon billions of dollars of taxpayer largesse. And I can tell you something, Adam, I'm not going to lie to you, it's a long shot for me to get elected. But if I get elected, I promise you, the chairman and the chief executive of Qantas will stand. They won't sit to do it. They will stand and they will apologize to you and to every other serviceman who experienced that. I give you my unequivocal guarantee I will make them. I will make them and I will remind them I'm giving you the opportunity to stand, to rise to an apology. Be grateful I'm not making you do it on your goddamn fucking knees.
Bless you, sir.
When Korean Airlines, when companies in Korea, when Japan Electrical, when companies in Asia behave disgracefully, the board and the chief executive go before the public and they get on their knees to apologize. I think maybe it's time we had a little bit of that. On your knees. Financially raping this country, sucking down billions of dollars in taxpayer-funded subsidies. Do you know what? When John Anderson, who was leader of the National Party, when Ansett tried to get when Ansett tried to survive, I don't know if you remember this, Ansett was desperately trying to survive. And Singapore Airlines offered to buy Ansett. Ansett was at that stage owned, it was going bankrupt, but it was owned by Air New Zealand. When Ansett said, well, we found a white knight that'll come and save us, Singapore Airlines, John Anderson said, no, we won't allow that. We won't allow Ansett to be owned by foreigners. Who's New Zealand? They're not foreigners. Fucking idiot.
How do we support you? How do we get you to where you need to be? What do we do?
Man, it's not that hard. You know, Adam, when I've gone before these parliamentary inquiries, Leah Weckert, the CEO of Coles, appeared right after me, and we had to share the same room, waiting room. So I'm sitting there writing out notes about all the terrible things I'm going to say about her. And she and her staff kept walking up and down behind me like trying to read what I was writing. I thought, good luck, good luck. I'm going to write it in a particularly bad handwriting. And they were all sitting there communicating with each other by text message. Like they didn't want to talk in front of me. So they were sending each other text messages. I could see that this is what they were doing. They were looking at each other and then looking at their phone and sending a text message and looking at each other. Obviously, that's how they were communicating. And one of the things I found is when I go before these parliamentary inquiries and I have to deal with politicians who are bought by corporate interests, or when I have to deal with the corporations themselves, for me, I don't know. For me, it's like having a battle of wits with an unarmed person. They're just not that smart, man. And what we need is a little bit of on the front foot with these guys. I'll give you an example. Max Chandler Mather, who's a young MP for the Greens. He said something not long ago about how companies like the mining companies and the banks that make extraordinary profits should be subjected to a higher rate of tax. And Matthew Coman, Crybaby Coman, who's the CEO of Commonwealth Bank, remember them? The Royal Commission called them the gold medalist for misconduct. Matthew Coman has such a heightened sense of entitlement. He has such arrogated contempt for the rest of society. He has such an attenuated case of head up his own arse disease that he went before Parliament and he said, statements like the one Max Chandler Mather has made diminishes the public's confidence in big business, and I don't think that's a good idea. And all the people in Parliament, he said this at a parliamentary committee, all the people in Parliament sort of nodded politely. And I thought to myself, if I was there, this is what I would have said. Mr. Coman, who was in charge of the retail division at Commonwealth Bank when you were stealing money out of people's accounts? You, yeah? Who was in charge of Commonwealth Bank when Commonwealth Bank Financial Planning was forging signatures on people's accounts? You, yeah? Who was in charge of Commonwealth Bank when the retail division through the Dolomites program was banned in Victoria, then the ACT, then Queensland, then New South Wales, because you are not engaging in financial education, you are product flogging, you are flogging debit cards to 14-year-olds. That would have been you, yeah? Who was in charge of the retail division when your bank committed 53,784 breaches of anti-money laundering legislation? That would have been you, yeah? Who was in charge of your bank when you were foreclosing on people who'd never missed a repayment or never defaulted on a loan? That would have been you, yeah? So just explain to me, Mr. Coman, who is it exactly who is diminishing the public's confidence in big business? Max Chandler-Mather, who's made some innocuous statement, or you, who has run a criminal enterprise and should be locked up, if nothing else, for conspiracy to commit fraud? I'm curious to know. Mr. Coman, Mr. Crybaby Coman, how it is that you still have a job in light of the fact that in your tenure as CEO of the retail division of Commonwealth Bank, all you did was break the law. Let's hear it from you on the record, please. Nobody does that. Why? Are they lacking some essential kind of physiological component, like a spine, or their set of testicles? What's the problem, man? Oh, that's right. Can't say that to him because his bank donates to your party. Oh, that's right. Well, guess what? They don't donate to my party.
Well, this is where we hope to support you. I'm so grateful for your passion today, your time today. The good news with my East Timor story is after doing my battle preparation in Queensland, the United Nations took over and I didn't actually have to go forward, but I was I was still stuck in bloody Queensland without my kit. I actually give you this thought as an Australian citizen that I've seen seem to work when it came to accountability. Under the OHS Act, the old OHS, Occupational Health and Safety Act, when it moved to WHS, I think one of the most effective law changes I've seen in my life was when we held individuals accountable. So once we actually saw when it came to safety, and to me this makes so much sense when we move into the financial sector, when we are actually started saying to individuals, CEOs, bosses, supervisors, and individuals themselves, you can no longer void yourself from accountability when something goes wrong in the workplace. When someone's killed or injured, it's not your company that's going to be sued. It's you who's going to be sued, and it's you who's going to go to jail. In my non-qualified opinion, to apply those same laws and rules to the financial sector, this one also rotted my soul significantly. The Commonwealth Bank to pay $700 million fine for anti-money laundering for terror financing law breaches. When I did deploy to the Middle East, this one I did go to, I couldn't help to think when I saw this article, I'm like, wow, and maybe I was exaggerating in my thought experiments, but I thought, here we have the Australian government sending their soldiers into harm's way to fight terrorists. Then the government pays my wage into the Commonwealth Bank, who's laundering money for the terrorists of who I'm fighting on a foreign battlefield.
100%.
That rocked my world. And I thought,
100%.
wow. So we send our young men and women forward to fight terrorists, but then we protect the banks who launder the money allegedly for the terrorists. And meanwhile, Qantas won't let troops deploy with their kit because they've gone over their baggage allowance.
And the guy who was in charge of Commonwealth Bank at the time, Commonwealth Bank Retail Division, is now the CEO of the bank. Matthew, look him up, Crybaby Coman. Big sook, Matthew Coman.
Why won't we, or why can't we? I mean, you did touch on it before. What is stopping us from saying, right, just like we did in the WHS Act, if you kill someone in your workplace, you are going to jail. Equally, if you launder money for terrorists as a financial organization, if you rip off the Department of Defense, if you rip off the government, if you have tax evasion, you are going to jail, as opposed to here's a slap on the wrist fine for laundering money for terrorists, for ripping off the Australian tax paper, for fraud, tax evasion. What's stopping us?
There's absolutely nothing stopping us. And this is a major aspect of the research that I do as an academic, this is a major aspect of, this is a major focus of my research, right? There is nothing stopping us. Baron Thurgood 100 years ago said, a corporation has no soul to be damned, no body to be kicked. So when you put fines on the corporation, who are you fining? You're fining the shareholders.
Well said.
But
Yes.
it's the executives who've taken these decisions. And it's the executives who are being rewarded for these decisions with their bonuses. And that's why it's got to be the executives that have to suffer the consequences of their actions. Otherwise, nothing changes.
Of course.
And this is why I went before Parliament and I said to Dr. Walsh, the Financial Accountability Regime Act is an accountability regime act with no accountability. What are you doing, man? She just looked the other way. Not because Jess, probably not because, I don't know her personally, but probably not because Jess Walsh is a bad person, but because she would have known, she would have got an order from her caucus, don't rock the boat. There's an article in the Sydney Morning Herald today that said that Albanese has overruled his caucus about gambling ads because he doesn't want to upset the gaming companies and the media. Mate, where are your balls? Where are your balls, brother? Were you elected to be Prime Minister by the Murdoch media? Were you elected to be Prime Minister by the Australian and the Daily Telegraph and the Herald Sun? Tell him, man. Were you elected to Parliament by Aristocrat Gaming? These companies target the poorest, the most vulnerable communities to flood them with bloody pokey machines. And you don't have the testicular endowment to stand up and say, you're not going to be allowed to advertise. We've done it to cigarette companies, but you won't do it to the pokey operators. You have no balls, you have no spine, you have no guts. And there is absolutely no reason why we can't hold executives to account. There is no reason at all. This is a major focus of my research. This is what I have won. I've won an ARC grant. They are almost impossible to win in law. They are extremely difficult to win, period. Only the most highly qualified academics in the country are even allowed to apply for them. And of those who apply, 91% fail. There's a 9% success rate, and most of that success is in the medical sciences. The number of ARC grants that are awarded in law is a rounding error. I've won a 3-year, $600,000 grant to research exactly how to fix this problem. And I'm willing to give up that grant. I'm willing to give up not having to teach for 3 years under that grant, to go to Parliament and to say to the Prime Minister, you will get no legislation through Parliament until the financial accountability regime holds people to account, so that when Marley Carnegie and Shano from the Drano, Shane Elliott, before he slinks back to New Zealand, when they preside over a division that is still financially raping the dead, they will go to jail, or you will get no legislation through Parliament. That's the deal, buddy. If there's any part of that you don't understand, let me know and I'll draw it in the sand with a stick for you. I'm sick of this, Adam. I'm absolutely sick of this. I'm sick of this, and it can be fixed. Unfortunately, I've got to be honest with you. The chances of me getting elected, I need all the help I can get. In the last election, the Citizens Party got 13,000 votes in New South Wales for the Senate. I'm going to need about 300,000. It's not because my message doesn't resonate. My message resonates. People get it. People get it. The game is rigged. The game is rigged. We're being played for mugs. We're having our birthright stolen away from us. This country is being destroyed through greed, dishonesty, and corruption. When people hear that message, it resonates. They say they'll vote for me, but I can't get it. I'm struggling to get in front of enough people, right? We don't have the money for billboards. We don't have the money for full page adverts. We don't have the money for adverts on TV. So the best we can do is the great leveler, which is social media. I've got a team of the most incredible volunteers. They're all volunteers. They're all doing this for free. I'm too old. I'm too set in my ways. I don't understand social media. My version of social media is I've got email. They're doing all of that stuff for me, and they're trying their absolute damnedest to get as much profile on social media for me as I can. But 300,000 votes, it's a lot of people to cut through. It's a lot of people to get in front of, which is why I'm grateful for this opportunity. But why I would say to your viewers, if what I've said has resonated with you, I need your help. I need your help to get this message in front of as many people as I can. I can't do it on my own. I'm man enough to say that.
Can people outside of New South Wales vote for you?
No.
So that makes it even more challenging. So you're taking 300,000 votes from just within one state within Australia to get that seat.
But if they're outside of New South Wales and they've got friends in New South Wales who haven't seen my interviews, please share it with them. Well, and let me say something else. I don't chase every vote. When you chase every vote, you stand for nothing, right? Chase every vote, you don't want to offend anyone. Chase every vote, then you kind of don't say anything to upset the banks, but also don't say anything to upset small business, or don't say anything to upset small business, but don't say anything to upset the lowest paid workers. I don't chase every vote. I have principles that I stand by. I have a narrow range of things that I will tackle. That's it. And if there are parts of what I've said, if you think that, well, going after the banks will affect your super, which it won't, right? The amount of money that each and every one of you has invested in your super in banks is minuscule compared to how much money you're paying on a daily basis to fund the most profitable banking industry in the world. But if there are things that people don't like, I say to them, I'm honest with them. Don't like what I stand for, don't vote for me. But if you like what I stand for, I need all the help I can get.
Well, I should point out to everyone, I have, of course, not been paid for this interview, nor am I paying the professor to come on the channel. I'm here to provide a platform for all politicians and candidates. I've extended this invitation to many people. The only the only politician who's actually responded has been Rennick, and he was very good. And I can see this like-minded approach from you, Andy, that yeah, we need to cut out this BS. I've just got a quick super chat here from Papa Bear, and a huge fan of you. He says, Professor Andy, what's your view of advancing white South African immigration and the disgraceful attitude our government held whilst most Australians supported it?
Look, I'm not my views on immigration are, I never talk about things I don't understand. My views on immigration are limited to saying to you, my problem with immigration is that massive amounts of immigration, the government loves it because it's a sugar hit to the economy, because it's lots more people in the country earning and spending. The banks love it because it's a sugar hit to the economy, and because it's a sugar hit to their asset base. It's a sugar hit to their statement of assets and liabilities because it pushes up the price of property. I think we've got to be very careful about massive influxes of immigration from anywhere because we have a housing crisis. Because there are so many young Australians who are not being able to afford a house. Now, there is research that's been done that says, don't blame foreign students, it's not their fault. If there is research out there that says the cost of housing has got nothing to do with immigration, I query that. I query the methodology of that research. I query, it strikes me as fairly obvious, a priori, if you've got a fixed amount of property, which we should be expanding, of course, but it takes time to build houses, right? If we've got a fixed amount of property and you have a massive influx of immigration, where are those people going to live? Where are those people going to live in a country where the price of property, whether it's buying or renting, price of rental property, renters can't rent anymore. Don't worry about the people who can't buy. Don't worry about them. Renters can't rent anymore. This is where we're going, man. Right? It's unbelievable. And I think the other thing we need to clamp down on, foreign investors who buy Australian properties to land bank out of the question. They've put a stop to it in Vancouver. They've put a stop to it in New Zealand. It's out of the question, man. Right? There are something like 1,000 apartments I heard, apparently, there are something like 1,000 apartments in the Docklands in Melbourne that record no water usage. It means there's nobody living there. Nobody living there because investors who've bought those apartments, they just want to get their money out of China. Right? The only people who should be allowed to buy property in Australia are people who are going to live in Australia.
I recall that metric very well when it was raised, when someone pointed out, well, we feel that all of these houses are not being used because there's no water being used in them. And there was a politician at the time who said, oh, well, that's a stupid metric. And the observer said, well, no, in fact, who lives in a house without brushing their teeth, flushing the toilet, having a glass of water, cooking, washing, or anything? But I can't remember who it was, but it's just when you said that metric, I was so surprised that the politician just dismissed it so blatantly and said, well, that's impossible. You can't see if someone's living in a house because of a water metric. And then it just seemed to, in my mind, go down a deeper rabbit hole where even when the truth is presented to these politicians, not all, but many politicians, even when they know the truth or it's presented to them, they just dismiss it. And this is where perhaps a lot of people are losing faith in the system. Look, I asked you for an hour, you've given me 2, so I'll sign off. I just have one last question, if I may. In your opinion, should Australia become a republic?
Probably it's probably time. Like I don't know particularly whether there's any particular benefit that we get from not being a republic. I grew up in South Africa, which became a republic in 1948. I don't have any particular loyalty to the crown. As a human being, I like King Charles because he stood up for science and he stood up for environmental protection when it wasn't popular to do so. But I do think that there's only so much you can do in a parliamentary term. There's only so much you can do in a year. And given the choice between pursuing a republic and pursuing a divestiture power for the ACCC to break up Coles and Woolworths, you can have a guess which one I'm going to favour.
Andy, I've really enjoyed today. If people want to learn more from you, I've left all links to all of your socials in the description below. But closing words and closing contacts for people to learn and more from you and support you.
Never, ever, 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 ever give up. Never lie down and die. Never put up with it. Never, ever, ever give up. And learn to shuffle.
Powerful words. Professor or Dr. Andy Schmulow, I'm very grateful for your time. It's been an emotional ride. I look forward to supporting you further. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Adam Stokes. Welcome to the channel. Like, share, subscribe. Andy, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.